You're listening to Kate Palmer from sparkletart.com.
Today I'm going to show you how to colour a very basic skin on Kimono Marci from La La Land. This clip is aimed at the beginner Copic user who would just like a few simple techniques and ideas so that they can create a pretty looking image. This is definitely not advanced Copic techniques. It's in real time so that you can colour along with me. I suppose that makes this a Colour with Kate clip.
I have the beautiful Kimono Marci from La La Land stamps, a Memento Tuxedo black ink pad,
Express It blending card, and I've chosen to use the Copic combination of
E00 Skin White, E11 Barley Beige, and R20 Blush.
Step 1 is to ink Kimono Marci using the Memento Tuxedo black ink pad. Then stamp this onto your Express It blending cardstock.
For today's face, you're going to need to know how to make 4 different marks with your Copic marker. I'd like you to take any marker and just practice along with me.
We're going to do all of our colouring today with the brush end of the Copic marker.
I want you to practice the following. Mark number 1. Making little circles that overlap with the tip of your marker to create a nice even blend. That's step 1. Step number 2 is making little dots with the tip of your marker. Step number 3 is making fine lines with the tip of your marker. So this line is made by holding the marker up and down and lightly touching the paper. The next line, hold the marker on the side and make a wider mark. And lastly, the last mark you'll need to make is a flick. Place the tip of your marker down and place the tip of the marker down and make a little flick quite quickly. Your flicks should end up looking like this so that they have a pale trailing edge, and that's just made as you move the marker and flick it and then lift it from the paper. And that's the 4 marks that you'll need to know to colour the image that I'm colouring today. And I've already stamped Marci on another piece of cardstock and paper pieced her little outfit together. I've also paper pieced her hair, and I'm now going to colour the face to add to the image.
Start with the palest colour, which for this is E00.
And we're just going to use that little circle. I want you to colour the whole image, avoiding the lips and the eyebrows, colouring the whole image using those little circles. Now remember to overlap the little circles for a smooth blend. You don't have to go over and over the same area of paper. Just make sure that the edges of your circles overlap for a nice smooth blend. Now you don't need to be perfect, this is just the first layer.
Now you may or may not be surprised to find out that this particular technique is called circle blending. So if you ever see or hear circle blending mentioned, this is the technique that they're using. It's wonderful for beginners because it helps to get a very smooth colour, and it's kind of no fuss. There's not a lot of things that you can do wrong here. So no stress, just get that first colour down and this will be your base.
And that's it, layer 1 done. Now I'd like you to put your marker aside and just wait 10 seconds or so for the alcohol to evaporate off that layer. That way you can see a bit more what the colour's going to look like. Next, grab your E11 and we're just going to make 3 lines. So starting from Marci's little cheek down here, mark 1, mark 2,
mark 3. Now you might notice I'm actually holding my pen on the side here so that I get slightly fatter lines, and this helps to add the shadows. You don't want something small and skinny at step 1.
That wasn't hard, was it? Now taking the E00 again, what I want you to do is, starting from that dark line you've just drawn, just flick the colour out into that lighter section of the face. Now you don't have to be particularly precise here. Just go over the marks you've made to soften them a little. That's all that this is doing. Now the next thing I want you to do is, still using the E00, where those two colours meet, I want you to use your marker to make little dots. Now this is just going to further soften the colour that's there, softening that edge. And that's all. And again, leave it about 10 seconds for the colour to settle. Now there's not actually too much more that we're going to do. A few more layers, a bit of pink, and you'll find that very quickly Marci looks rather gorgeous. At this point I'd like you to swap back to the E11. And we're just going to go over those lines again, but what I want you to do is make them a little bit thinner. Now you might need to turn your image like I'm turning mine. You need to work in whatever is the most natural direction for your hand.
When I'm colouring off camera, I'm constantly moving my image. You'll find that you get a much better blend, better colour and better results working with the natural direction that you colour in. So don't be afraid to move the image. See how these particular lines are a little bit thinner than the first line I laid down? That's on purpose. It helps build the shadow.
Back to E00, and I'm going to swap back to that circular motion. At this point I'm going over the E11 line I've just drawn, all the way around her face, just with that little circular motion. And then I'm just going to go once over the entire face again. Again, just using those little circles.
This helps to blend the edges of the colours we have already laid down. It also helps to smooth out the base layer of her skin tone. Now, have a good look. I'm still using that circle blending technique. I'm also still avoiding colouring over her lips and sort of between the eyes and the eyebrows. That allows these areas to stay lighter.
It's at about this second layer that you can see the blending starting to happen. Now I haven't really done very much to this, and already the colours are sort of starting to really quite come together. Back to the E11 one final time.
The E11 is what I'm using to add those shadows, and it's the same colour for shadows all over her face. At this point I'm doing very fine lines and taking my time to make sure that they're very neat, because this is what you'll see in the final coloured image. This is one of the final layers. We're now going to use E11 to add some depth and dimension to the face by adding shadows.
I'm also going to use the E11 very lightly to just mark in the side of Marci's nose and a little dip underneath. I'm going to put a tiny little bit under her lower lip just to highlight the shadows, and then draw a very fine line from about the middle of the nostril up towards the eyebrow. Now you only want to do that once, and you just want to make a very small mark, just like I have here.
This step is to highlight the shadows and add dimension to Marci's face. You're not trying to draw a nose on Marci.
Now I'm taking the R20 and I'm getting the chisel tip here, and then with the E00 I'm going to add some pink for her cheeks. So just get some of the colour on the tip of the E00, and this will give you a lovely blended pink cheek that still looks pink and rosy
without looking cherry red. This technique is called tip blending. It's when you use the tip of one marker to take colour from the tip of another and use that to lay down colour. Now this is a wonderful technique for making colours you might not already have, or blending colours where the colour families just don't quite mix, like one colour's a bit too dark to properly match with the next one. So remember this technique, tip blending. You'll use it often. It's wonderful for cheeks and lips and flowers.
Now just scrape off any extra colour from the R20 on a piece of scrap paper before you use the marker again. Now while I've got Marci sitting there, I'm going to add the R20 to her lips. This one's just straight from the marker, just so that they're a little bit pink without being overpowering. Now I'm just going to flip this around towards me and add a little of the E00 just above the eyes. Now I've kept that white until now, just so it'll be a similar colour but lighter than the rest of the face. And now the last thing I'm going to do one more time with my E00 is just go over what I've previously done. Now I'm not going over the cheeks, I'm going next to them. I'm going next to the eyes. I'm colouring next to the little brown lines we've done as the shadows. Next to the shadow under the lip. Again next to the cheeks. Next to the colour near the nose.
Sorry about being off camera, I fixed that in a second. I'm just using circle blending to go over those areas.
Next to the shadows under the hair. And very lightly next to the nose again. And I'm just going to add a little bit more over here to break up that final line. And then just wait for that to dry. Now you might like to add a little bit more or less colour around her cheeks, depending on how much you want them to be a bit different from the rest of the face. That'd be a little bit darker perhaps, but that's up to you. Now the colours don't actually settle until it's dried, and of course being a Copic marker you can always go back and add a little bit more later.
It's right at this point I realise I've forgotten one of the shadows on Marci's nose. Now this one isn't necessary, it just sort of makes it look a little bit more cute. It's the shadow where the bump of your nose would be.
And I'm going to add just a little bit more of the E00. And darken some areas of her face.
This next layer of colour is not actually necessary, it's just me having a play, seeing if I can improve the depth and the 3D look of the image.
Just a little more. And then perhaps a final layer of E11, just because this side has become a little bit light. Now that Marci is all paper pieced together and the Copic ink has dried on her face, this is what your little face will look something like. Now, As I said when I started, this is for Copic beginners, and it's 4 basic lines to get a pretty looking face. We're not trying to get perfect shading here. We're not trying to get perfect light sources or perfect anything. This is for those Copic beginners who have just bought their markers and would just like to create a pretty face. And this is a really simple way to do it, with just a few lines
and 3 different Copic colours.
And some basic marks. So I hope this has been of some help to all you Copic beginners out there. I know how frustrating I found it when I first started. There are lots of amazingly talented Copic artists out there with amazing techniques and complicated clips to follow and all sorts of wonderful things that you can do as your skill advances. But as a beginner, I found it very difficult to find clips online, things that I could successfully do myself as a beginner and still have a nice image. So I hope this has given you a bit of a head start and that you find it of some use.
Thanks so much for watching and have a wonderful day. Bye.